This is your Wednesday daily delivery. I am Michael Rand. Great to have you guys back again for another show. We've got a lot to get to today. Chip Scoggins will join me here in just a little bit, Star Tribune columnist, to talk through mostly the Byron Buxton news on the injured list with that hip. It sounds like it's a mild strain is what they're calling it, but if you have to go on the injured list, that's not great for the Twins. So just kind of the impact there, Chip's thoughts on that, and a little bit of Vikings talk with Chip as well. Speaking of Vikings talk, Nick Mullens, new quarterback competitor, who we all presume will take over as the backup quarterback, wouldn't probably make a trade, even if it's a minor trade, wouldn't make a trade that deep in training camp if you didn't think that he could be your number 2 quarterback ahead of Sean Mannion and Kellen Mond. He was at camp at practice on Tuesday and talked with the media afterwards, so we'll play a little clip of that and talk through that a little bit. And got to get to some state fair stuff because I'll be out there a few different times with some of my colleagues, with some folks around the Twin Cities sports scene. So I'll give you a rundown of where and when you can find me at the fair, which starts tomorrow. Doesn't feel possible, does it? But the fair does start tomorrow, and that first appearance for me is tomorrow. But first, what did I miss? Twins lose 4-2 to Houston. Made it interesting at the end, and the game was already plenty interesting with a lot of subplots and twists. Twins were getting shut out 4-0 going into the 9th, but got a couple runs and had the bases loaded before Jake Cave struck out to end the game. Again, right there, showing you some of that lack of outfield depth. No offense to Jake Cave, but I don't know if that's exactly the person you want up in that situation. But when you're already down Byron Buxton, when you're already down Alex Kirilloff, when you're down Trevor Larnach, when Nick Gordon has left the game because of dizziness, your options are a little bit limited. So they come up short in that game, drop another game in the standings, now 3 behind Cleveland, and have now lost 4 straight games, haven't beat the Astros all year long. Game was also notable, of course, for the return of Carlos Correa to Houston, and he happened to break up the no-hit bid. Justin Verlander pitched 6 hitless innings, then lifted, and Carlos Correa breaks up any combined no-hitter effort in the 7th inning by getting a hit. And then, like I said, the Twins got themselves a little bit closer in the end, but ended up losing. Bigger takeaway from this game, though, tensions boiling over in the 5th inning. Rocco Baldelli ejected for the 2nd time this month, for the 4th time this season. And that's notable to me because Rocco kind of had this kind of zen, mild-mannered, chill vibe going for the early part of his Twins managerial career. 2019, he was only ejected twice all season. Twins won 101 games that year. The short year in 2020, only ejected once. Last year, ejected 3 times. That was a frustrating season. This year, ejected 4 times already in 121 games. So, 6 ejections in 3 seasons before this one. 4 already this year, including those 2 this month, including the one, the last one with the blocked home plate call, going off on umpires afterwards. And this one didn't like the explanation he got. Basically, he was charged with a mound visit in the 5th inning after benches cleared, and he came out to check on Aaron Sanchez, his pitcher, to make sure everything was okay. Charged with a mound visit so that the next time in that inning when the pitching coach came out to visit with Sanchez, they had to remove Sanchez from the game. So Rocco Baldelli afterwards talked a little bit about the frustration of that moment and what happened. So let's take a listen to that.
Obviously, there was a visit given during a bench clearing incident, and at the moment when I'm out there, after the 2nd time that our guy and their guy started talking to each other, the 2nd time that happened, I decided to stay out there to make sure that everything was calm. And on the way off the field, I looked for Sanchez just so I could go to him and say, "Are you fine?" And looking for him to say yes, and I say, "Okay." And I walked back to the dugout. When I looked up to see him, he had walked a little ways away and went back to the mound. On the way back to the dugout, I just walked over to him and said, "Are you fine?" He said, "Yes." I walked away. Pretty straightforward. And as that inning got going, or after a few more pitches, I asked Pete Mackey to go out there and make sure he was lined up to get the next guy out. And when he went out there, we were alerted that there was a visit given to me during a bench clearing incident. So I didn't agree with it. I didn't like that it was given in the first place, but I really didn't like the lack of communication on a really unusual play.
And I think he was right to be frustrated in this case. But I think the bigger picture to this is this has been a frustrating month, and we're starting to see some more emotion, some more evidence of that frustration from the Twins manager. If he had been, more mild-mannered before, if he had been more of, like I said, kind of that even-keeled guy who was just going to kind of ride things out and not get too high, not get too low. He's gotten low a few times this month, and probably showing the wear and tear of a season that's had a lot of ups and downs. So watch for that the rest of the way. See if that storyline continues, or if if he kind of returns to being more of that mild-mannered Rocco. I don't mind it, to be honest, but I think it is interesting, a departure from what we had seen from Rocco Baldelli in his first 3 seasons.
MGM Wine and Spirits is the choice for savings, service, and a great selection of spirits, premixed cocktails, wines, and of course, ice-cold beers and hard seltzers. With over 30 locations throughout the Twin Cities and beyond, there's an MGM near you. Head to MGMWineandSpirits.com to find a convenient location in your area. Get social. Follow MGM on Facebook and Instagram for all the latest news and trends. Make great moments with MGM Wine and Spirits, your locally owned and operated choice for over 50 years. Save time, save money. Shop MGM.
Good to have Chip Scoggins back on Daily Delivery, Star Tribune columnist, of course. Chip, we should be doing a state fair thing next week, I believe, on Tuesday. You've got a book out with Patrick Royce. Congrats on that. Glad to see that hitting the bookshelves and sellers near you, huh?
Yeah, it's finally out. We had a little bit of delay, just unavoidable kind of pandemic, slowing things down. But people are finally starting to get it in their mailboxes and front porches, and I think it'll be in bookstores here maybe this week, pretty soon. But yeah, we're gonna be at the fair on Tuesday, August 30th at 11 a.m.
Yep.
So if you want your book signed by Patrick, he will be there to sign them, and I think you're gonna host a Q&A maybe for a few minutes just to talk about it. So it's exciting. It's fun to finally see it kind of come to fruition.
Speaking of coming to fruition, Chip, Twins this season. I want to talk mostly about the Twins today with you, maybe get a little Vikings talk as well. But we were talking before we even started recording about how kind of frustrating this year's team has been. I don't know quite what the parallel is. As I was trying to think about it, it's not like the Jimmy Butler Timberwolves year where it just felt like they were grinding and it wasn't any fun the whole way. Because I think this team does have some likable components to it, and it hasn't felt like a joyless kind of thing like that. But this is a team that's been either in first place or in contention for the vast majority of the summer, and yet it feels like they just can't get much traction. It's like something happens, somebody gets hurt, there's frustrating decisions, there's walk-off losses, and now the latest is another injury for Byron Buxton. Has to leave Monday night's game against the Rangers with what they're calling hip soreness. And even though they would, optimistically like to think of this as a day-to-day kind of thing, Rocco Baldelli did not seem terribly, optimistic about where this was at this point. Where are you at with kind of how this injury is being characterized and kind of this team in general?
Yeah, we'll start with Buxton.
Yeah.
In fact, he's having an MRI, and that Rocco basically sprung the hip thing out of nowhere last night after the game. We've all known about the knee,
right?
But to say, oh yeah, he's been dealing with this hip injury all season privately. For him to say that now tells you, well, it leads me to believe that they're on the verge of maybe shutting him down for a while. Because if his knee is bad and his hip's bad, you have this money tied up and you do not want to risk anything long term. And you know, obviously their doctors have known about this and been treating it, but it's just, I you know, with Buxton, it just never ends. And I feel bad for the guy because we saw in April and May what kind of player he is when he is healthy, but I just don't know that he's ever going to be healthy. And I've been thinking about this with his knee, and no one has really raised the point. Is this a chronic thing? I mean, is this something that's going to need surgery after the season, or is this something he's just going to deal with for the rest of his career? Or how does this get better? I guess that's my point. I mean, does rest make it better? Because it's clearly impacting how much he can play, whether he's DHing, the days off. To hear Rocco talk about it, that, you know, he's basically fighting through a lot of things just to get on the field. And it's like, that's not what you want from Buxton, having to fight through hip and knee injuries just to be able to play. You want him to be at his best and be one of the best players in the game. So, I mean, you don't want to have to shut down your best player when you're fighting for a division title. But, you know, I wonder how much that's impacting his hitting, because he's basically become feast or famine, home run or nothing.
Yes.
You know, I mean, he's just become the strikeouts are alarming. You had the great stat about his hitting with runners in scoring position.
I couldn't believe that.
I couldn't either. But then when you sit and think about it, it's like, yeah, when's the last time he's had a big timely hit? I mean, heck, the only guy that really gets a timely hit anymore is Miranda.
I know.
And Arise, you know, I mean, So the Buxton thing is, I would say, very concerning. But to your first point about this team is, you know, we were talking about, is like, even when they were winning, I think the fan base was frustrated with this team. And I don't know if it's because of the way they handled the pitching staff, you know, some of the just bad losses they've had. There's just been such wild swings between the highs and lows here that they'll win 4 games and then just have a couple clunkers that are, you know, The Pagan thing has made people mad continuously. The bullpen infuriates. What is there a thing in baseball that infuriates a fan base more than a bullpen that falls apart? It seems like that's it. Because
because it's like you think the win is secured in some way, and you know, for a long time people have got pretty spoiled because, you know, when the teams were good in the 2000s, you had, you know, largely Joe Nathan, you know, locking down a lot of those games, and before that Eddie Guardado making things interesting, but usually coming away with the save in those games. And you had Glenn Perkins for a few years, even in the kind of the down years. But and now Taylor Rogers was pretty reliable for a while. They just haven't had. Even the bullpen's been better lately. They've given away so many games where you thought they were going to win this year that it has been frustrating. But the point with Buxton is just like, this isn't normal. Like, someone shouldn't have to fight so hard just to get on the field. And, you know, it feels strange that they kind of sprung the hip on us now and saying he's been dealing with it all year, and that some of the stuff, like the large majority of whatever he's been dealing with, they haven't even told us about. It doesn't feel like they're doing him many favors if they're doing that. Maybe they're in this kind of weird spot where it's like he has such an injury history that if you say so much about the injuries, then people are like, well, here we go again with Buxton. But if you don't say anything about it, then it just looks like he's having a lousy 3-month stretch. Well,
that's what it is. I mean, the fans are just so conditioned that, you know, if he, you know, falls down, you see it on Twitter. I mean, it just lights up. Oh, he's, you know, out for, you know, 2 months or whatever. So fans are just, they're sort of just conditioned to this, that Buxton's going to be. And I think we should, at this point, you have to be. You just have to say this is what his career is going to be. Flashes of brilliance and flashes when he's, you know, either injured or just can't play because he's dealing with something. And it's just been too much evidence of it. And again, not blaming him. You know, players can't handle, or they can't, you know, it's not their fault to get injured. But the timing of it, and maybe he just did more damage to it last night. That
maybe Rocco he stole a base in the first inning. I mean,
maybe Rocco had to come out and say, that's the thing is. But again, I go back to, like, what is the end game here? How are they going to fix this? Is it surgery? Is it?
And is the hip I mean, the hip got him out for a while last year too. Is this something related? Is the knee related to the hip? Because when you're favoring the knee, you start doing something to the hip. Is the hip some kind of chronic thing? I mean, and if you're talking about flashes of brilliance and then flashes of not being able to play at all or not being as effective, like how do you build around that? How do you construct a contending team when you know at any moment one of your best players might be out for a long amount of time just because of the history?
Well, and that's the problem. I remember the day before this season started, someone asked Buxton, if you're healthy, how good you can be, how much damage can you do? And he said a lot. And we saw that. I mean, at April, May, you're thinking, well, it was Rocco. You're seeing the best player on the planet, but it just never feels like it's going to be sustainable.
Right.
Because of these injuries. And so how do you build around that? I don't know, because he's obviously one of your best players when healthy, but you also have to just factor in there's going to be stretches where he's not healthy and not producing. And let's talk about his hitting and his approach. I mean, the home runs are great, but the strikeouts are way up. He's always been a pretty high strikeout guy, but what's his average now?
It's like 220. I mean, he's been Miguel Sano this year, like a good, like what, kind of the all or nothing approach. Obviously much greater impact on defense, all that stuff.
Sure. But it's speed,
in terms of his pure like power, all or nothing approach, he's been Miguel Sano at the plate.
Yeah. I mean, it feels like it's home run or strikeout now and nothing really in between. And so, I mean, that's a problem. This is a problem. So again, I don't know how much. What we don't know is how much these injuries are affecting him at the plate,
right?
In his approach, but it just adds to the frustration of the season, and you just feel like this thing is. I mean, when you look at it, they've been bad for a while now, or they've been an average team, average to bad team, And after that start they had, which is probably fool's gold a little bit, but even you're playing in a bad division.
Yeah.
I think that's part of the frustration too, is like this division was there to be had. And for myriad reasons, they've shot themselves in the foot.
And it's felt a few different points this year like it was slipping away. But if Buxton's out for any extended period of time, and they're not going to have Malley at least for, a handful of days here as they kind of shut him down to see if the shoulder gets better. And they're entering a stretch where they're playing the Astros right now.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's, the Giants and the Red Sox, who are not great teams, but they're not terrible teams. They're 500 teams. Those are competitive teams. Those are teams that are about,
they're not the Royals.
Those are about like the Twins. Yeah. It's not the Royals and the Tigers anymore. And then you got, I think, the Yankees, the White Sox. I mean, they're entering a stretch now where they're playing some better competition and they're not at full strength. And they weren't even at full strength before this Buxton stuff and even before the Malley stuff. I mean, they've been down pitchers, they've been down outfielders for a long time. Like this just feels to me, I think Megan Ryan kind of encapsulated this in her game story Tuesday morning. Like this kind of feels like this could be the thing that kind of pushes them over the edge, and they're just not going to be able to overcome this if it's as serious as it sounds like it could be.
Well, it is. Yeah. And if you're missing Buxton, as bad as he's hitting with, in clutch situations, he still can run into a home run,
Yes.
And he's doing that. But, it's funny when I looked at this lineup at the beginning of the season, we all talked about the pitching. It's like, boy, they don't have enough pitching, but lineup's going to be pretty good, right? They're going to be able to hit. Lineup's terrible right now. I mean, Kepler's not hitting. Polanco's having an off year. Correa's having an off year. Buxton's become a strikeout machine. He's feast or famine. And so it's like, you basically trust two guys at this point, Ariz and Miranda. Well, that's not good.
No, that's not good.
And so now that was the one thing, is like, you felt like even if their pitching, was faltering, you felt like they could maybe score some runs, but this lineup has been shut out 12 times, right?
Yeah. It's amazing. It's like the lineup is feast or famine. And it's like, because they're still like 10th in batting average, 10th in runs scored in the majors. Like they're like relative to the league, they're doing okay, but it's almost like the frustration shouldn't be as great because, they have accomplished something. They are still in this race. They've won more than they've lost this year. It feels like for whatever reason, the wins this year have not felt as satisfying as the losses have felt disappointing.
Well, no, and that's the thing. I mean, when you look at that lineup and you tell me you have Arise, Correa, Buxton, Polanco, and you're going to be shut out 12 times, and I don't know, they're all in there, they're all shutouts, but it's like this lineup should not be this up and down. And, Kepler giving you nothing hurts, So, no, you're 100% right. Like, they've had so many excruciating losses that just leave you're like, God, just infuriating, that I think it's kind of just cast a pall over this whole season where the fan base is just angry with this team and frustrated. Again, I go back to even when they were winning, it felt like, I don't know if you're always waiting for the other shoe to drop, but you had this feeling like something about this team just feels off. Yeah. Whether it's the pitching, the bullpen, whatever. And now you had the struggles of the lineup, and it's we'll see how they navigate it. But they've surprised us before. But yes, I do agree that you feel like they're running out of steam right now.
Well, at least they got us to the Nick Mullens era.
Chip. They got us almost to end of training camp. That's
got us to the end of training camp. I feel like the Vikings trade for Nick Mullens on Monday, a conditional 7th round pick. So you see how low of a leverage move it is, but just the fact that they did that and that it generated so much chatter. I mean, quarterback's going to generate chatter no matter what, but shows just how bad the backup quarterback situation was before they made the move, because we saw nothing from Sean Mannion, certainly, and outside of a second half glimpse of a few good throws from Kellen Mond in that preseason game against the Raiders, haven't seen much from him in camp either.
Well, no, and anyone who's been out there to camp and watched, I mean, it was just patently obvious they had to do something. I mean, neither one of those guys was a credible backup. And that's the thing. It's like, if they were banking on, Cousins never gets hurt, he's always right. That's not a plan. No, that's not a plan. And it's great that he's been so durable, and it hasn't been an issue that you had to worry about really. But neither one of those guys was a credible plan B, and so you had to go out and I think what this Kwesi and O'Connell wanted to do was not predetermined before he sees guys in some preseason games, right? Give them at least a chance there to show what they can do. And that's great that Mond looked, better in the second half of that, or against the Raiders or whatever, but you're going against third teamers. You're not going to be in the NFL. I mean, if you were to rely on him, you're not facing third teamers in a game, right? He's going to be going against starters. So it's like, you have to be able to project, and he really struggled. I mean, he dropped a lot of snaps in camp, and he just seems so robotic and not sure of himself. His decision-making, he just would held on to the ball. It's just, you couldn't say that he was going to be your guy. And so, is Mullens the answer if you had to play him? I don't know. I mean, I can't sit here. I mean, he has NFL experience.
Yeah, so he's made 17 starts, I think. So it's a little bit more of a body of work, at least, than these other guys.
Exactly. But it's they definitely upgraded there. I just, if you said, Nick Mullens has to play 3 games this year, are you going to feel comfortable?
Probably not. I'd feel better though than I did when they didn't have Nick Mullens, which again is a kind of a commentary on where they were.
I'm curious to see what they do. We were talking about this at practice yesterday amongst some riders. Do you cut both Mannion and Mond? Do you try to put Mond on the practice squad you don't want to have only 2 quarterbacks in your locker room.
No,
I think you need 3, and you want 1 on your practice squad if you're only going to have 2 on the 53.
I think this is the end of Mannion. I think he'll get cut, and they'll try to get Mond onto the practice squad.
That might make sense, but you also might look and say, do you really think it's going to work here for him? I mean, do you think he can develop into what, something, a backup
at least, yeah.
Or do you just say, we're going to try to find someone else to put on the practice squad and do it? So I'd be curious to see how they handle this the next couple of weeks. But I mean, you got to get Mullens up to speed and get him going here. I'd be curious to see. Probably too soon to try to play this week, right?
I don't know. I mean, yeah, they got the preseason game, then it's 2 weeks, and then they play the regular season. And I don't know what they'll do right away. I'm just get him acclimated, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know if he'd play this weekend, but the good thing is you have a couple weeks to get him in practice and get him acclimated to the system. So,
yeah. Last thing, I mean, it feels like obviously the preseason doesn't matter. Losing 17-7 to the 49ers doesn't matter. You're going to reset at the start of the year. None of the starters are really playing. That said, I'm a little concerned about some depth in this organization right now. And we probably had those concerns going into camp. This is still a roster that's got a lot of haves and have-nots on it. But it still kind of seems like the plan is don't get hurt, because what you see in the preseason doesn't make you think they've got a lot to offer. If their backups are playing against other teams' backups and they're 0-2 right now, that does not give me a lot of confidence if certain guys go out.
Yeah, and that was if you remember this time last year, Suhan asked Mike Zimmer, how you feel about your depth? And he's like, I'm concerned. This is a top-heavy roster, and it really hasn't changed.
No.
Right? I mean, you have undeniable stars with some big contracts that eat up a lot of the salary cap, and so you're forced to rely on young players, and that's where they're at. I think you're going to see a lot of young first and second year guys be the primary backups. And so that's just because of where they're at with their top tier players and how much money they're making. That's sort of what they have to do. And so, is the depth better or worse than last year? I don't know. I do like some of these young guys they brought in.
Sure.
Some of the rookies. Asamoah, the linebacker, I think has a chance to be pretty good. Was he the second round pick but I think he's looked good, and some of the young cornerbacks, but they're young. They're unproven, and that's the thing. So, every team's going to, I think, be nervous about their depth, right? But as we've seen, depth wins in the NFL because nobody stays healthy.
Yeah,
that's just that's the rule of thumb. You got depth wins, and we all hate preseason games, but you better find your depth in these preseason games because you're going to be forced to use them.
Yep. Well, at the very least, they need to stay relevant into late October when we can all shift our focus to the Wolf. It's all cyclical, Chip. We just
That's right.
We're just
just give me to the next one.
Building bridges to the next hope. All right, man. Well, I appreciate it. We'll see you next week out at the fair. All right.
All right, brother. Thanks, man.
Good conversation with Chip Scoggins. And like we talked about, this kind of feels like a tipping point, right? They're 3 games back now. Byron Buxton on the injured list. Got a slate of tough games. They got Houston again here. They got some, Giants, Red Sox. They're okay. Yankees, White Sox. This is not going to get any easier. They're going to have to play their best baseball over these last 5 or 6 weeks, and they're going to have to do it without a lot of their best players. We'll see if they can hang in the race and make September still be meaningful. Chip and I talked about Nick Mullens. He met with the Twin Cities media on Tuesday after that trade from the Raiders. Didn't give us a whole lot. I was not out there, but a couple of my colleagues were out there. I think they had it was noted in the Star Tribune story that Mullens offered up quite a few cliches. This was Mark Craig writing, for the record, Mullens said the word focus, focused, or focusing 12 times in the 6 minutes it took for his first interview session with the Twin Cities media. As for, quote, taking it one day at a time, he said that 4 times. We'll get a little snippet of what Mark was writing about right now. Well, let's hear from Nick Mullens.
You just got to focus on the right things, and that's learning as much as I can, take coaching well, and connecting with new teammates, and just focusing on one day at a time. And that's really what I'm focused on.
And again, he's just here as an insurance policy. The best case scenario for the Vikings is that he never sees the field this season, and that Kirk Cousins has a productive, healthy year, which has been the norm for him in his career. But certainly working to shore up that backup quarterback situation that's been a mess, frankly, during training camp and the preseason. The plan wasn't great going in, but it feels like the plan is at least a little better now when you've got a guy who has started 17 NFL games and has a little bit more of a track record of maybe giving you a chance to win if something else happens to Kirk Cousins. Let's finish with the cooler. Like I said, I'll be out at the fair a few different times, including tomorrow, Thursday. scheduled to talk with Wild General Manager Bill Guerin at 2:15 p.m. on the Star Tribune stage. Not long after that, I will be talking with Dan Minnesota. He was on the podcast a few weeks ago. His book, A Slap Shot in Time, about the Minnesota Fighting Saints. We will be talking about that book at 3 p.m. on Thursday. Friday, 2 days from now, supposed to talk to Tim Connolly, Timberwolves' new general manager, out at the fair. And then next Tuesday, hoping to get on with Chip Scoggins and Patrick Royce at 11 a.m. to talk about their new book about Royce and his life in sports writing. So some exciting stuff coming up at the fair. Hope you will meet me out there and enjoy some good live conversations out there. I'll probably make some of those podcast features as well. I'm not sure if I'll make them part of regular episodes or bonus episodes, but we're planning to record those conversations out there at the fair as well. That will do it for me here today. Thanks for joining me again on Daily Delivery. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll be back at it again on Thursday.